All right, stop right there. Let me see some ID.
Why am I being stopped?
You fit a description.
What description?
Turn around.
I'm a federal agent. You can verify this.
That doesn't change anything. Turn around. Now.
It was early evening in Atlanta's Buckhead district, the kind of Friday when the sidewalks stayed busy well past sunset. Restaurants were filling up. Office workers loosened ties and headed toward dinner plans. The neighborhood carried its usual rhythm of quiet confidence, polished storefronts, steady foot traffic, and an unspoken assumption that nothing unusual was supposed to happen here. Marcus Hale moved through it easily. He had spent the day inside a federal office building several blocks away, sitting through hours of review meetings and footage analysis. By the time he stepped outside, his shoulders felt tight from the chair, his eyes tired from screens. He decided to walk instead of drive. 6 blocks, enough distance to clear his head before meeting a colleague for dinner. Marcus was 41, fit, clean-cut, khaki slacks, a dark button-down shirt, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. Nothing flashy, nothing sloppy. He carried only his phone and wallet. His pace was steady, unhurried, the posture of someone who knew exactly where he was going. There was nothing unusual about him. Across the street, Officer Evan Cole slowed his patrol vehicle and watched. Cole had been assigned to Buckhead for years. He knew the storefronts, the traffic patterns, the residents who waved as he drove past. He prided himself on what he called proactive awareness, looking for what didn't fit, trusting instincts, acting before problems surfaced. When he saw Marcus, something in him tightened. A man walking alone, well-dressed, but not dressed for leisure. Confident, purposeful. In Cole's mind, those details didn't add up the way they should have. He eased his car toward the curb and let Marcus pass. Watching from behind the windshield as the man checked his phone, waited patiently at a crosswalk, then continued forward. Nothing illegal, nothing suspicious, but Cole had already made a decision. He parked and stepped out of the car. Marcus heard the footsteps behind him before the voice. He stopped and turned, calm and attentive, the way people do when they expect a routine interaction. "Sir," Cole said, positioning himself just close enough to assert presence. "I need you to step back and show me some identification." Marcus didn't move. Before reaching for anything, he met the officer's eyes. "Before I do that," he asked evenly, "can you tell me what law you believe I'm breaking?" The question wasn't hostile. It wasn't loud, but it landed. Cole's jaw set. "You fit a description." Marcus paused, letting the words sit between them. "A description," he said, "or an assumption?" Cole shifted his weight forward, his tone sharpening. "Both." "Turn around. Hands behind your back." The sidewalk slowed around them. A couple lingering outside a restaurant glanced over. A man near the corner stopped, pretending not to listen. Marcus stayed where he was, his hands visible, his voice controlled. "Officer," he said, "you have an articulated reasonable suspicion. I'm not refusing to cooperate. I'm asking you to explain the basis for this stop." Cole didn't answer the question. He stepped closer instead. That was the first off-ramp, the moment where the encounter could have ended with a brief explanation and a quiet apology. Instead, Cole closed the distance, his authority asserted but unsupported, his certainty growing as his justification shrank. And as the people around them began to slow, to watch, to reach for their phones, the stop that should have ended quietly began to harden into something else. Something that could no longer be undone. Marcus could feel the shift around him before anything else happened. The way conversations nearby softened, the way footsteps slowed, the awareness that comes when a private moment turns public. Officer Cole stood too close now. Close enough that Marcus could see the tension in his jaw, the stiffness in his shoulders. Cole wasn't asking questions anymore. He was asserting control. "Turn around," Cole said again. "Now." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't step back either. "Officer," he said, carefully, "you haven't told me what crime you believe I'm involved in. You haven't described a suspect. You haven't cited a call, a report, or a complaint. At this point, this stop is unlawful." Cole's eyes flicked briefly to the people watching, then back to Marcus. There was a report of suspicious activity in this area. "When?" Marcus asked. "Earlier." "How much earlier?" Cole hesitated. "Just long enough to notice." "And what was the description?" Marcus continued. Height, clothing, direction of travel. Cole's mouth opened, then closed. There was no report, no description. The explanation had been offered too late and too thin. What Cole felt in that moment wasn't uncertainty. It was exposure. I don't have to explain myself to you, Cole snapped. You're being detained. For what? Marcus asked. Cole's hand dropped toward his cuffs. For failing to comply. Marcus exhaled slowly. The calm in his voice stayed, but something underneath it hardened. I am not refusing lawful orders. I am asserting my Fourth Amendment rights. That was when Marcus reached into his front pocket. He moved deliberately, every motion visible, slow enough that no one could mistake it for anything else. He pulled out a leather credential holder and opened it. Special Agent Marcus Hale, he said, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The gold shield caught the streetlight. The identification card was clear, official, undeniable. For a fraction of a second, Cole froze. It was there, the opportunity to stop, to verify, to call it in, to step back. Instead, Cole shook his head. That doesn't mean anything, he said. Those can be faked. A murmur rippled through the small crowd. A woman across the sidewalk raised her phone higher. Someone else muttered, He just showed you a badge. Marcus held the credentials steady. You can verify them with one phone call, he said. Atlanta Field Office. Cole didn't reach for his radio. You're not walking away, Cole said. Turn around. No, Marcus replied. I'm not submitting to an unlawful detention. Cole grabbed his arm. Not violently, not wildly, but firmly enough to make the line unmistakable. Don't touch me, Marcus said, pulling his arm back just far enough to break the grip. You don't have legal authority to detain me. Cole tightened his hold, trying to turn Marcus toward the wall. You're resisting, he said loudly. Not to Marcus, but to the people watching. I'm exercising my rights, Marcus replied. There's a difference. The woman recording spoke up. He showed you his badge. Cole ignored her. His focus had narrowed, his decision already made. Backing down now would mean admitting he was wrong, and he wasn't ready to do that. Hands behind your back, he shouted. Last warning. Marcus didn't move. The struggle lasted less than a minute, but it felt longer. Cole, trying to force compliance. Marcus using balance and positioning, not aggression, refusing to be turned. The tension drew more eyes, more phones, more witnesses. And then a new voice cut through the noise. Cole, step back. The command carried weight. Cole looked up to see Sergeant Dana Whitaker approaching from a street, her expression already tight with concern. She took in the scene in seconds. The crowd, the phone cameras, the badge still visible in Marcus's hand. I said step back, she repeated. Cole released his grip, breathing hard, his authority visibly fraying. Sergeant Whitaker turned to Marcus. Sir, she said, controlled and professional. Can you tell me what's going on? Marcus straightened his shirt, his composure intact but strained. Your officer stopped me without cause, dismissed my credentials, and attempted to detain me after I asserted my rights. Whitaker took the badge from Marcus and examined it. Her expression changed immediately. This is real, she said quietly. She turned back toward Cole, and in that moment, standing in front of witnesses and cameras, Officer Evan Cole realized something had gone terribly wrong, but the damage was already done. Sergeant Whitaker didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Step back, she said again, this time without looking at Officer Cole. Cole obeyed. He moved a few feet away, his shoulders stiff, his eyes darting between Whitaker, Marcus, and the phone still pointed in his direction. The crowd had grown quieter now, not because interest had faded, but because the tone had changed. This was no longer a street-level dispute. This was something else. Whitaker handed the credentials back to Marcus. Agent Hale, she said, her voice lower, steadier. I apologize. This stop should not have happened. Marcus nodded once. He didn't say thank you. What unit are you with? Whitaker asked. Organized crime, Marcus replied. Atlanta Field Office. Whitaker inhaled slowly, already anticipating the fallout. She turned to Cole. Did you verify his identification? Cole shook his head. I was in the middle of. You didn't verify, Whitaker repeated, cutting him off. You didn't call it in. You didn't request backup. You didn't articulate a crime. Cole said nothing. Whitaker glanced toward the woman holding her phone. "Ma'am," she said, "did you record the entire interaction?" "Yes," the woman replied. "From when he first stopped him." Whitaker nodded. "I'm going to need that video." "I'm not deleting anything," the woman said. "This is wrong." "Understand," Whitaker replied. "And you shouldn't." She turned back to Marcus. "You're free to go. You were free to go the entire time." "I know," Marcus said. A patrol supervisor arrived minutes later, then another. The sidewalk began to clear as officers redirected foot traffic away from the scene, but the phones didn't stop recording. Even as Marcus stepped aside with Whitaker to give a brief statement, the sense of containment was gone. What had happened was already beyond the control of anyone standing there. Inside a nearby patrol vehicle, Cole sat alone. His radio crackled with instructions he barely heard. His body camera light blinked steadily, recording silence now instead of commands. He stared at the steering wheel, replaying the moment the badge came out, the second he could have ended it, the second he chose not to. At the precinct later that evening, the tone was subdued. Bodycam footage was pulled, timestamps synced, reports were drafted and redrafted. Supervisors spoke in lowered voices. No one joked, no one minimized. A lieutenant watched the footage without interruption. He saw the initial stop, the refusal to articulate suspicion, the dismissal of credentials, the physical contact, the crowd, the intervention. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair. "This is a problem," he said. Internal Affairs was notified before midnight. By the next morning, the witness video was circulating online. Cropped clips turned into full uploads. Titles hardened. Comments multiplied. The narrative was no longer controlled by reports or policy language. It was being shaped by what people could see with their own eyes. A federal agent stopped without cause. Credentials dismissed. Force applied anyway. By the time department leadership convened later that day, the question was no longer whether the stop was justified. It was how something like this had been allowed to happen at all. Because as internal records were pulled and reviewed, something else surfaced quietly in the background. Not just one incident, but a pattern. Prior complaints, similar stops, familiar allegations. And suddenly, this case wasn't about one decision on one sidewalk. It was about everything that had been ignored before it ever happened. The investigation moved quickly once the pattern was impossible to ignore. Internal Affairs didn't start from scratch. They didn't need to. Officer Evan Cole's file was already thick. Prior civilian complaints, stops that ended without charges, encounters flagged for insufficient articulation, each one reviewed in isolation, each one closed with minimal action. Seen together, they told a different story. Within days, Cole was placed on administrative leave. His patrol privileges were suspended. His bodycam footage from previous months was pulled and reviewed alongside complaint records. Supervisors who had signed off on earlier incidents were asked to explain their decisions. None of them could. Marcus Hale filed a federal civil rights lawsuit the following week. The allegations were precise. An unlawful stop without reasonable suspicion. An attempted detention without legal basis. Use of force absent justification. And a documented failure by the department to intervene despite repeated warning signs. The city's legal team reviewed the evidence. They watched the witness video. They reviewed the bodycam footage. They read the internal memos that noted concerns but recommended no action. They saw the same behavior repeated, the same explanations recycled, the same opportunities to stop it missed. Settlement discussions began quietly and ended quickly. The city agreed to pay $4.7 million. The money came with conditions. Mandatory changes to the department's complaint review process. An early intervention system to flag officers with repeated allegations. Independent audits of stop data. Public reporting requirements. Oversight that could no longer be handled quietly. Officer Evan Cole was terminated less than 2 months after the incident. The termination letter cited violations of constitutional protections, department policy, and public trust. It noted a sustained pattern of behavior, not a single lapse in judgment. His certification was revoked. His name entered into the national database that ensures he would never serve as a law enforcement officer again. Marcus Hale testified during the reform hearings. "I knew my rights," he told the council. "I had credentials. I had institutional backing. And none of that stopped this from happening. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone." The room was silent when he finished. This case didn't end with relief. It didn't restore what was taken in that moment on the sidewalk. The assumption of belonging, the expectation of fairness, the sense of safety in a public space. It exposed something deeper, a system that treated patterns as coincidences, a culture that rewarded confidence over accountability, a structure that allowed warning signs to stack up quietly until they could no longer be ignored. This case had footage. It had witnesses. It had documentation. Most people don't. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe to the channel so they don't disappear. Share this video so accountability doesn't end with a settlement. Do you think departments should be forced to intervene after repeated complaints? Or is this still being treated as an exception instead of a warning?